Ecuador. It's one of the most biodiverse places on the entire planet. Seriously. But how do you actually protect all that natural wealth? Well, it turns out there's a whole official rulebook for it. Today, we're going to dive into the laws and procedures designed to safeguard Ecuador's treasures, and we're going to see why a law on paper doesn't always translate to protection on the ground.
So, here's our game plan for this explainer. First, we'll get right into the central dilemma facing conservation in Ecuador. Then we'll look at the actual laws and the official step-by-step path to protection. From there, we'll see what happens when those laws meet reality, we'll weigh the pros and cons of the whole system, and we'll end with a big question that really challenges the whole idea of protection.
Okay, so what is the core issue we're talking about? Simply put, in Ecuador, there is a massive gap between conservation in practice and conservation on paper. What's really happening on the ground often isn't what's officially recognized at all.
Check this out. Only 60% of protected areas in Ecuador have actually finished the formal legal process. That leaves a huge 40% just floating in a kind of legal limbo. It really forces you to ask, how effective can a system possibly be if it's not even fully implemented for almost half the areas it's supposed to cover? And this is the fundamental question, isn't it? You've got indigenous communities who have been successfully protecting their lands for generations, no paperwork needed. And then, on the other hand, you have some fully legalized national parks that are facing constant threats. So does a government's official rubber stamp really guarantee better conservation? To really get our heads around this dilemma, we have to look at the official rulebook. So let's dive into the legal foundation that Ecuador built to try and solve this very problem.
Everything, and I mean everything, is built on the country's 2008 Constitution. Article 405 creates the National System of Protected Areas, they call it SNAP, to get all conservation efforts under one umbrella. Then Article 406 gives the government the authority to regulate these fragile places. And maybe most important, Article 407 flat-out prohibits activities like mining in these protected zones. These three articles are the absolute bedrock of Ecuador's conservation law.
Now, building on top of that constitutional bedrock, we have the 2017 Organic Environmental Code, or the COA. Just think of this as the master blueprint. Before the COA, environmental rules were, frankly, a mess, all over the place, totally inconsistent. This code was a game changer because it pulled everything together into a single, unified framework for how you create and manage these protected areas.
Okay, so we've got the Constitution and we've got the code, but how does a piece of land actually get that official, legal stamp of approval? Let's walk through the exact step-by-step process.
This is it, the official 6-step journey to protection. And it is a highly structured process, believe me. It all starts with a formal application, and from there it demands some really rigorous studies, a detailed management plan, and even proof that it's financially sustainable. It's designed to be thorough. And I want you to pay close attention to that last step, the participatory process, because it is absolutely critical.
Step 1 is all about making your case on paper. You can't just say, hey, this forest is important. You have to prove it. That means submitting a formal application with precise maps, crystal clear conservation goals, and a whole bunch of scientific evidence to back it all up.
And the evidence they require is serious stuff. We're talking exhaustive biological inventories of all the plants and animals. We're talking deep socio-environmental studies on how protecting this area will impact the local communities. In short, you have to prove its value to the nation from every possible angle.
Okay, remember that final step I mentioned? Community participation. This is non-negotiable. The law itself recognizes that you can't just protect an area from some faraway office in the capital. The process is specifically designed to be transparent and to build consensus with local communities, because without their buy-in, long-term conservation is, well, it's pretty much impossible.
So that's the process on paper. It sounds pretty logical, but how does it actually hold up in the real world, with all its messy human complexities? Let's look at a few examples. Let's talk about the world-famous Yasuni National Park. By the book, it's a perfect case of complete legal formalization. But it also proves that the biggest challenges aren't the technical ones, they're the human ones. The story of Yasuni is a constant, complex struggle to balance conservation goals with the rights of the indigenous peoples who have called that land home for centuries.
Here's another real-world point of friction: local autonomy versus national control. A city or a municipality has the constitutional right to create its own protected area. But, and this is a big but, it can't just do whatever it wants.
The local rules have to be in perfect harmony with the national COA regulations, and that creates this constant tug-of-war that requires a ton of careful coordination.
And what about private conservation efforts? Well, the trade-offs here are incredibly stark. A private reserve can be nimble, flexible, and quick to act, but its protection might only last as long as the owner is committed. If you go the official legal route, you get permanent, stable protection and way better access to funding. But it means you have to navigate a mountain of bureaucracy.
So with all this in mind, let's just step back for a moment and take a critical look at Ecuador's legal framework, the COA itself. What are its real strengths and what are its weaknesses?
So what's the verdict on the COA? On the one hand, it's a huge plus. It creates clear standard procedures, gives robust legal guarantees, and provides access to technical and financial resources. The problem? It can be incredibly slow, wildly expensive, and just too rigid for diverse local situations. And here's the real kicker. A system designed to help formalize protection can be so complex that it might actually shut out the very community initiatives it's supposed to support.
And that brings us full circle. We've seen the law, we've walked through the process, and we understand the real-world stakes. Now it's time to face that final, critical question. After everything we've looked at, the question is this: to what extent does this legal framework actually help versus hinder effective conservation and fair community participation? To put it another way, is this structure a ladder that helps people protect their land, or is it a cage that just traps them in bureaucracy?
There is no easy answer. And this tension, this friction between formal rules and practical justice is at the very heart of conservation policy, not just in Ecuador, but all around the globe. It's a question worth thinking about. Thanks for exploring this with me today.